Hey, good weekend to you. Welcome to Leading Edge. I'm Jerry Anderson. Good to have you guys along. Hey, we did it, people. We're getting new legislative districts in Ohio. This is 6 years after over 71% of us voted to change the Ohio Constitution in an attempt to weed out gerrymandering. You know, the drawing of legislative districts purely for political gain. But wait, it turns out there's a problem. We're still gerrymandered. The Republican majority on the state's redistricting commission gave us more GOP supermajorities, where the number of Republicans in both chambers, the House and the Senate, far outweighs the percentage of Republican votes in statewide elections. State Senator Teresa Fedor, Democrat District 11, has been hot on this topic. She fought to change the location of hearings on this issue in Toledo so people could really come out, and people really came out. Also, here is Petee Talley, Executive Director, the Ohio Coalition for Black Civic Participation. Senator, this was constitutional. It's why we all voted that way back in 2015. What went wrong?
Well, we know that we are back on the gerrymandered treadmill again. And Ohio was identified as the worst gerrymandered state in the nation. And unfortunately, the map that was voted on last night, 1 hour after the deadline, we are more gerrymandered than ever. And this harmful practice disregards Ohioans' political preferences, leaving voters with little choice of who will represent them in government. And we know that it took a lot of effort, almost 10 years of effort to change our constitutional twice. Yeah. And the voters came out in resounding numbers that they just want fair maps. Wow. That was in 2015 and 2018.
You would give me that the Republicans are going to be the majority party in any map that is out there based on statewide election. But let's get into this, folks. How Republican is Ohio? I'm going to give you something. Last gubernatorial race, that's statewide, right? We all vote for it. DeWine, 50.4%, Cordray, 46.7%, about a 4-point difference. I can hear you, Republicans. What about the president? Gotcha. Presidential race 2020, Donald Trump, 53.3 to 45.2 for Biden, about 8 points, pretty impressive. And 2016, also Trump by about 8 points. So you're into that 53, 54. But we are talking about now a new map that will give Republicans of what? Some 62% of the Ohio House, nearly 70% of the Senate. That's not even close to reflecting statewide voting by real Ohioans, is it, Senator?
No, not at all. In fact, the last minute, we only had until 10 o'clock to really look at the map that was going to be voted on. So, that takes a lot of time. They were slow walk in this process and really just flying in the face of voters' constitutional amendment, not following their oath of office. And breaking it down today, we're still breaking it down. And we know that they gerrymandered those districts to have a super majority, which flies in the face of the required, components of those constitutional amendment sections. So, we're going to have a 4-year map. We have
the other thing, people, is because this couldn't reach bipartisan consensus. We were looking at the possibility of a 10-year map. Think of that, based on census and actual voting. No, we're going to stay with the heavily lopsided makeup of this legislature for the next 4 years, and I guess we do this dance again. Petee Talley, I want to get you in here. Ohio Coalition for Black Civic Participation. It's nice to meet you, by the way.
Thank you.
Is it your understanding that majority Republicans did not take into consideration race when drawing districts? Talk about that and why that's important.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much for having me. I feel like my constitutional rights have been canceled by the actions of this commission. The rights that were afforded me and people that look like me in the Voting Rights Act should give us an equal opportunity to participate and to elect candidates of our choice. But these map drawers, on the very first day they rolled out the map, readily admitted that they were instructed not to take race into consideration. So right now, Jerry, I'm feeling a little bit ignored and irrelevant and maybe even invisible. And I guess just like the fairy tale Cinderella, when the clock struck midnight, the maps turned back into pumpkins.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to go a little further. You would give me this if somebody stood up. Well, actually, this wouldn't surprise me in Columbus these days. Somebody stood up and said, "Excuse me, I'd like you to draw a couple of lily white districts out, my way." Wink, wink. That'll all be. None of us would stand by for that, I would think. So some would say, well, no, wait a minute. Why should race have played an issue in this? And I think you can do this, Petee. You answer how you want to, but there's a phrase you guys use that flies around out there. Stacking and packing. Explain that. That's very interesting.
Stacking and packing means that they are breaking apart communities of color to put them into other districts to dilute their power, right? To elect candidates, or they're bunching us all together into a district to limit our ability to have more than maybe one or two or whatever. And it's not right. And as far as your comment about the white districts, many of those white districts, if you look at these maps, and as Senator Fedor has said, we have to kind of analyze a little deeper.
Sure.
Many of these white districts that are 80, 90% white, they never got touched, right? They remain wholly intact. And so that's very unfair when you would take, so race had to be taken into consideration in those regards, in my opinion.
Because these new maps got no Democratic buy-in, they remain in place for 4 years. Governor Mike DeWine sat on this commission. My sense was in reading that he wasn't happy with these maps. Keith Faber sat on this commission. Frank LaRose, he of the flawless election of 2020, they were sounding like they were less than comfortable with these maps, and yet they still voted with the majority. What does that tell you, Senator?
Well, I want to tie this into our current crisis.
All right.
Just this week, the hospitals are saying we are full. We have a crisis on our hand because of the unvaccinated folks carrying on this pandemic. And the governor said his hands are tied by his own party to put a mask mandate or vaccine mandate in place. And why do we have that type of situation? Because we have currently super majority gerrymandered districts.
The governor who actually did, I thought, and a lot of people thought early on in pandemic, some strong stuff was getting some national. He's been spanked. The back of his hand has been slapped by the Republican majority down there in the state capitol, and I'm not sure he's up for fighting them anymore heading into a re-election year. Okay, got to take a break. Teresa Fedor, Democrat, State Senate District 11. Petee Talley joining us, Executive Director, Ohio Coalition for, help me out, Petee.
Ohio Coalition on Black Civic Participation.
There we go. We're going to find out more about that because you know what? Civic participation includes voting. And I think this legislature has its eyes on voting in Ohio. We're back with more on Leading Edge.